to item 9, consider. Got my mic here. I've listed two areas that I think we should deal with separately. The first is Council's overall response to COVID-19, and then I'll come back to, as a separate part of this item, the infrastructure criteria that the government has announced. So if we begin on the Council's response, and Councillor Walker, quite appropriately, you asked about what we're doing in this area, and I'll ask our officers to address it under a number of different categories. I think probably you don't need to take them separately. The first and the critical thing is we're maintaining our essential services, water, waste and fresh water, collection of waste, the core services through Auckland Transport, and so on. The second was the Meals for the Homeless initiative, and thank you very much, councillors, for the warm support that you gave to that. Just an indication of interest in it. On the posting I put on my Facebook, I think I got 57,000 reaches and close to 1,500 likes. So clearly there was a lot of interest and support for that. What brought this item up in particular was the opening of the Food Distribution Centre, which was at the request of the National Emergency Management Agency. That started yesterday with our call centre, manned by our normal call centre workers, taking well over 1,000 calls, specifically on the need for food parcels. 1,000 calls. And the distribution centre is being established right now. We will be bringing the food that constitute the parcels into that tomorrow, and the parcels will be delivered by Monday, or starting on Monday. That again is a big effort. I think we were one of the first two councils in the country, Mace, to get up and running at the request of the National Emergency Management Agency, which is, I think, demonstrates the effectiveness of our council in responding to those calls, and that's going to be a really important part in ensuring the sort of people we're targeting at the moment are those who have lost their jobs, and sadly, day by day, we just see more and more job losses, but are not yet plugged into the Ministry of Social Development agencies to be getting support. So we are providing the interim support that people often quite desperately need to get food on the table for themselves and their kids. I'll get Tanya in response to David Taipure's question to talk about the Māori community response. And the other thing, of course, is just getting the information across to the community. But Mace, if I can ask you to lead off on this item, and then maybe Tanya, if I can get you to add in on the Māori community response aspect of it. Thank you. Mace.
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and councillors, members of Chair Taipure. Certainly since March 25th, there's been a significant amount of activity. The types of activity that have been undertaken by Auckland Emergency Management and other staff include staff attached to the Ministry of Health undertaking health checks of international returning travellers. In addition to that, we are also coordinating with other agencies, most notably being health-led, 8 hotels in the Manukau area that are catering for returning travellers either for quarantine in one hotel or isolation facilities where those travellers don't have an isolation plan in place. So that's a significant piece of work. Staff also, as His Worship mentioned, assisting with the distribution by the City Mission to the homeless who have housed vulnerable families they support. Maintaining targeted public toilets that are used by essential workers, particularly for truck drivers and bus drivers, but also others that are out and about. So we have reduced that right down. We're at 57 public toilets at present. The deployment of staff in the call centre to maintain the 0800 number for emergency welfare and basic food parcels and toiletries, and for those Aucklanders experiencing hardship. So these are Aucklanders who aren't already clients or attached to other welfare support or being looked after in their local community. As the Mayor said, 1,018 calls on the 1st of April yesterday. Most of those calls for emergency basic food items. Some of the calls were for other issues relating to medical needs, and they were re-referred onto the appropriate agencies. But of the 3,440 calls received by the call centre yesterday, 54% of those calls were concerning some element of COVID-19, so a high level of interest in what's happening. Our public information and communications has had an extensive provision for information to Auckland around COVID-19, and as you will have noted, perhaps the online version of our Auckland and the news site has been converted or repurposed to really provide updated information and that we're getting from the Ministry of Health and also the National Emergency Management Agency, and particular to Auckland. And that's been very helpful for the work that I've been leading in the last week and Kate Crawford's led before that. We've established staffing of our Emergency Coordination Centre, including a group controller reporting to the National Controller, and a roster of group controllers for the foreseeable 4 weeks, or 3 remaining weeks. That will include Rachel Kelleher, who's on your list as a group controller, Kate Crawford as General Manager of Auckland Emergency Management, of course, and myself. And then we have some redundancy there as well, or a contingency that was mentioned by Councillor Stewart. So we have 2 key roles. One is the coordination of the welfare response in Auckland, and I've described what we're doing in that regard for emergency food packages, and other welfare for particularly homeless has been a real focus, and those staff that are seconded to Ministry of Health and Ministry of Social Development as well. Many of those staff come from our frontline services such as libraries and arts, community and events teams. So redeployment of Auckland Council staff has been critical in meeting the needs of welfare of Aucklanders. The second response has been that general response to Auckland emergency management operations, and we've been undertaking that in terms of logistics and the like. Staff are also attached to the Northern Regional Health Coordination Centre with the New Zealand Police and Green Lane at the Green Lane Clinical Centre. I'm aware through that attachment and liaison that hospitals in Auckland and Northland are at 60% capacity, so there is quite a lot of room and redundancy at present to enable any response, and there's been other work done to cater for any ICU or acute response. Staff are currently planning more deployment to Ministry of Social Development for those Aucklanders who are considered vulnerable, those people aged over 70 in particular, who don't have an email contact or other means of contacting or seeing what the updates are on websites. And that initiative's expected to commence early next week. And the last thing is just to return to, we are standing up the Emergency Management Centre 7 days a week between 7 AM and 7 PM at the direction of the National Controller. So that's fine. Your Worship, I'll hand over to Tanya in terms of the Pauwhakarehe response.
Thank you. I'll ask Tanya to take over now, and then maybe Ian, if we come back to you if there's other things that you need to add in. Tanya, please.
Thank you. Tēnā koe. Tēnā koutou e ngā mema o te poare, tēnā kōrua, ngā mihi nui te kaupapa o te poare, tēnei wā, tēnā tātou. Just to give you an update on what we've been doing in terms of establishing a new PO called PO Whakarai. This sits within Auckland Emergency Management. The staff who are currently working there, we've set it up, we've been going for about a week now, and the staff who are currently working in there come from a mixture of Te Waka Angamoa, Auckland Emergency Management and the Southern Initiative, and we also have some staff who have joined us from the Maunga Authority. So these are people who know our Māori communities across Tāmaki, and they understand them. So what we didn't want to do is waste time having to work alongside all the other agencies trying to work out who the networks are in Tāmaki. We know those. And so this is specifically to deal with anything Māori related and COVID-19. So we're embedded within Auckland Emergency Management, and we coordinate any engagement with iwi, hapu, whānau and Māori to ensure that we're taking a targeted approach to our Māori communities across Tāmaki Makaurau at this time. To support Māori-led responses, which is the feedback that we're getting, that Māori want to lead, they don't want to be told what to do. We need to know what's happening in order to make sure that we're directing our resources where they're needed. We're utilising all our existing networks to reach out to Māori communities and gauge their needs. We've seen the benefits of having a Māori-led response through other situations, and we're listening to Māori and being led by what they tell us. Member Taipari, as you said, tangihanga has been a consistent issue, and we are connected to those central government networks as well, and so subject to some advocacy that happened, particularly with the National Iwi Chairs Forum, you would have seen that some of those rules changed. So there is a network who are advocating through the current structure and outside of the current structure. Māori are also saying that they really want fit-for-purpose communications, and so what we've been doing is coordinating some of the information that's already there, so Ministry of Health approved, but coming out of the likes of the National Pandemic Group, the website Uruta in particular has been very useful for Māori. We've been working with them to plan and help them deal with agencies in an appropriate way for them. For example, one of the initiatives that the Auckland Emergency Management Team and Te Waka Angamoa and others had been supporting before we got into level 4 was the establishment of a marae network, Te Kotahi Tāmaki, working with Te Ropu or Waiora, which is a membership of Māori who have disabilities and also kaumātua, getting them ready to be able to respond to the communities that they know best. Māori are also asking about how do they support whānau during this time, particularly kaumātua, and there have been some requests around kai, but we also know that iwi are looking to provide leadership, and as part of the new structure we have a PO tangata, and I'm holding that space open at the moment while we start to have the kōrero with iwi about how they would like to be involved. So we're managing inquiries and requests. We've got an email address up and running, so some of you may have seen that. That's akgeoc powhakarai at aucklandcouncil.govt.nz. Now that the 0800 number is also operating, we'll be working alongside the welfare function to ensure that we're applying a Māori lens across things. We've got about 20 core staff who have been working to set up the PO. We have lots of staff who are really keen to be redeployed to help out in those communities. So the other thing that we're doing is putting a lens across all the R's: reduction, readiness, response and recovery of emergency management, to ensure that we're capturing how those efforts are supporting Māori communities in Tāmaki Makaurau, but more than that, understanding where the gaps might be so that we can place our resource in the right place. Tēnā koe. Tēnā koutou.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Ian, anything that you'd like to add to the comments made already.
Sure, look, thank you, Your Worship. So clearly you've heard about what we're doing as an organisation to support the communities across Auckland and by transferring staff and seconding people to work in other areas. But we also have a wide range of essential services that the Auckland Council Group is responsible for. So they include obvious things like water, transport, waste, cemeteries, animal management, the Auckland Zoo. There's a number of them. And right across those essential services, teams have been split, so specialised staff and personnel who are involved in the core delivery of those services are no longer working as single teams. The teams have been split. To date, we only have one case of COVID across the Auckland group. We expect that will change in time, but right now we only have one, and we wish to avoid a situation where if we do get a case, we don't lose a whole team that provides an essential service. So the approach of splitting teams has been taken right across all of our essential services. In fact, some of our services have gone to the extent, and the Auckland Zoo is a good example, where if it comes to the crunch, the folk who look after the Auckland Zoo animals will be living in the zoo with their animals away from their families. So there's a lot of dedication there to ensure that those sorts of services are maintained. Perhaps the most not difficult area, but the area we need to focus on is the skilled personnel that are necessary to maintain these services. And we're also working with local government New Zealand because there are other local government units across the country with very small numbers of skilled personnel, for example, in the water engineering area. And it may be that there's opportunities there that skills can be shared should the situation demand it. So we are working across the country. We're very much focusing on having skilled personnel and ensuring we don't lose a lot of skilled personnel because of one or two outbreaks of COVID, so that those essential services can be maintained.
Thank you very much, Ian. Look, we'll go through the question list for this section of the extraordinary items alphabetically again. If I could just ask the first question, Ian, you mentioned that there's one person across the group that has been infected by COVID-19. I just wanted you to clarify that is not a person, though, that has had contact since becoming contagious with other members of the council group. Could you comment on that?
Yes, that's correct. Actually, we've congratulated the person feeling unwell, got in contact with us, did not come into work, self-isolated, got themselves checked, found out they were positive and stayed home. So it's exactly the approach that not only the government communications are encouraging, but our own communications. And so that's exactly the sort of response we want our staff to engage in. So no, there was no link back into our organisation from that person.
Thank you very much. So, first of all, Councillor Bartley, questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't see the video, but about those Māori in our communities who are not connected with a marae or, aren't getting any iwi assistance, and how we can support that part of the Māori community, and also can get those same messages so that we can put them out to our communities that are doing coordinated local responses.
Thank you. Absolutely, Councillor. We just got approval the other day from the controller to start our outreach, and so getting some of those key messages out to the communities will be absolutely vital. The other reason for having that central coordination point is because iwi, a lot of iwi are actually quite sophisticated. It's making sure that we have a nice, easy way to cater for all Māori communities in Tāmaki Makaurau. And even if there's nothing that we can specifically do, we can certainly direct them to the right agency or the right answer to stop them having to bump around a number of agencies.
Thank you. Can I just suggest at this stage, because I know it's a time thing, that every councillor has the chance to ask one question and perhaps a supplementary to that. So if you can be thinking what your most important question is, and that means that we can get through in a reasonably efficient way. Councillor Casey.
Thanks, Your Worship. My questions relate to. Can you hear me okay? Yep.
Yep. Yeah, it's a bit of a rough line, Kathy, but we're okay. Yeah.
Okay. My questions relate to our cemeteries and crematoria. A couple of questions, Mace. Are we allowing people to visit graves at the moment? That's number one. And number two is, I want to hear about the readiness for an increase in crematoria services and the readiness of our staff, because it'll be a really difficult time for them.
Mace, thank you.
Can't hear.
Sorry, Mace, have you got your mic on, please?
Apologies.
Yeah.
Councillor Casey, we do have a plan for our cemeteries in terms of capacity. So we have over 10,000 burial plots available across the region, largely centred around the three significant hub cemeteries of Manukau Memorial Gardens, Waikimete, which is relatively modest, and North Shore Memorial Park. We also have 6 cremators based in those 3 locations as well. In addition to that, we are aware of the capacity that exists on private cemeteries and in private cremation and funeral homes. So we do have sufficient capacity should the worst happen through this pandemic. We have also done quite a lot of planning with Ministry of Health and others in terms of how we maintain our staff's health and well-being during burial or cremation activities. So working together with Funeral Directors Association as well to do that. We have 3 teams of sextons who are on a roster, and we have what's been colloquially called a 5 deep list that can be called on to assist, including contractors if that's necessary for mitigation and contingency. People are able to visit cemeteries still, although, as you will appreciate, during burial and cremation services we are controlling the people who are able to visit with a burial, and that is limited as prescribed by the Ministry of Health to those people whom have been in the bubble of the person who is deceased, and we are escorting them into the cemeteries for those services at that time. In addition, we've put in place, together with funeral directors but also ourselves, taking photographs of the caskets and any photographs of the ceremony of burial and the last rites being delivered at the burial site or at the crematoria, and allowing, where the funeral director wishes to, a 2-way streaming option for families as well.
Thanks, Mace. Just one supplementary. How many staff do we have currently scheduled to work in our cemeteries and crematoria? What's the size of that workforce?
At the moment, we have 30 people, ranging from administration through to operational staff, and then we have ability to call on a further 60 through contractors and other staff within the organisation with the types of skills that would be required.
Great.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a question concerning water tankers, the service that was delivering through Healthy Waters to our rural communities in the northwest, northeast, and the south. I presume that's going on a needs-be basis.
Yes, it's Ian Maxwell here. Yes, the existing services undertaken in association with the drought are continuing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I read somewhere 350 million litres had been delivered through the supplementary tankers we put on. And everybody will be aware of the briefing we've had from Watercare to show that we are down to about 53% at the moment. It's still not in panic territory, but the message is going out to everybody. Don't wash your house, don't wash your car, don't water your garden, but do wash your hands. So if we keep to that mantra. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Mayor. My questions have been asked by Councillor Casey with the cemetery. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coombe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And kia ora koutou, Tanya, Mason, Ian. Thank you for the update and the tremendous work that has been underway leading Council's response. This was the question that I had that I directed at Meredith, but it's probably more appropriate for you, Mace, was can you just clarify what has been happening since the emergency was put in place in terms of the decision making and the involvement of elected members? So I appreciate there's been a lot of decisions, but where has it been possible, for example, to consult with the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, and how has that happened?
Yes, good morning again, Councillor Coombe. So there have been regular briefings with the Mayor around what has happened, and in some cases, however, we are given specific directions by the Director of Emergency Management, but we've been also communicating those in the daily governance updates to the Mayor and Deputy Mayor, and then additionally to stakeholder updates and elected member updates at the end of each day.
Thank you. I think it's just good to know because we've just signed off the delegation, just what has been happening prior to that. So, kia ora, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Are you there, Linda?
Yes, I don't have any further questions.
Thank you. Councillor Angela Dalton.
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions, and it's regarding the 0800 number. I'm wondering when people are coming through the 0800 number, that there's an opportunity, or you may be doing this already, of assessing where they sit within a cohort. So we've got a whole new cohort of people who are vulnerable, and not used to negotiating or navigating the social welfare system. So people who have lost their jobs and people who have had their salaries cut considerably down to a subsidy now. I wonder how we can get a feel of how many of those people are as a percentage of the calls coming through, as opposed to perhaps the more vulnerable that we regularly would expect to hear from. Is there an opportunity to do that? Because I think that matters, and when we're going to allocate resource, particularly for redirecting and connecting those people to get the help that they need, that they're not really aware of where to go for that.
Thank you. That's a very good question that I put to Mace myself yesterday. And maybe if you could touch, Mace, in addition to that, on the contact we've had with ordinary food banks dealing with their normal clients.
Yes, Your Worship, and thank you for the question, Angela. We are asking a series of questions which triage people in terms of their need, and where their need, what we're attempting to do in the case for this welfare is in response to the COVID-19 emergency. So this is bridging people between finding themselves in a position, as you say, where they're not used to navigating the normal social and welfare supports. So bridging that through to being able to have a much longer term, more sustainable support from the normal agencies. So we are, in some cases, as I mentioned, and I don't have the numbers at the end of yesterday, but approximately 25% of the people on the calls up until 3 o'clock yesterday were being redirected to other agencies where they could receive other assistance other than the emergency food supplies.
If I may just have a supplementary about how we might be able to deliver some messaging, because I think sometimes the messaging has been fantastic and everyone's doing an incredible job, but sometimes it is targeted to our most vulnerable, rightly so, but we've got this new cohort who need to hear from us. We acknowledge you as somebody who has lost their job or is now on a subsidy, and all of a sudden they don't know where to go to get this help, and it might be, and really I think elected members are relying a lot on social media to get the messages out. So if we could get more of an indication of what those numbers look like and where the need is, because I'm sure all of us are doing in our own roles redirection to resources as best we can.
Certainly, thank you, Councillor Dalton. I'll see if we can get any additional segmentation of those numbers so that you can support that. And in answer to the Mayor's question, we are working together with food banks who are being resourced through their normal resources, and tell us they are keeping, whilst it's difficult, they are keeping up with demand. So that is also good news.
Thank you.
Yes, I think it's important to stress that this new food distribution centre is designed for that bridging role. And, we've got a classic case that was referred to me yesterday of a woman that with, I think, 4 kids who said, hey, I've never had to ask for anything like this in my life, but, we've lost our income as a household, and there is that delay before you get the Ministry of Social Development putting you on a particular benefit. Hopefully this will be a transitional role, because hopefully social development will keep up with the demand, but at the end of the wage subsidy we could see another spike. So this is a really important safeguard for those families that are suddenly and unexpectedly thrown out of work, not having an income, and wondering how the hell they're going to feed their kids. So 1,000 calls yesterday, that's perhaps a bit of an indicator of the scale of the problem that we'll be facing, and it really is important that we can fulfil that role. And I want to acknowledge the government that's we're doing the coordinating, we're doing the phone bank, they're providing the money for the food. We've got a supermarket chain that's providing the food, obviously. We're paying for that, a courier firms that are delivering, and another firm that's providing the place where we can run the distribution centre and the staff for that. So it's a really important initiative, and one that I'm really pleased that we're able to help on. Councillor Chris Darby.
No, nothing at this time, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Al Filipina.
Nothing, just comments after Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Fletcher.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question relates to whether we have sufficient, in a procurement sense, whether we have sufficient gear of masks and gloves and protective gear for all of the staff who are working on these essential services.
Okay, PPE. Ian, maybe you could answer that question.
Well, thank you, Councillor. There is sufficient masks and protection equipment essentially for the health system, and there's more coming into the country. For local government, there is an issue around the supply, but commencing next week, and I think it's some of the extras coming into the country next week will be available for those targeting those essential workers for local government, and a website will be established, and local government across New Zealand can access PPE equipment as they require it. So look, the situation is on the verge of getting a lot better.
So you'll keep us updated on that particular matter?
Yes, I will.
Thank you for that. Can you please convey to Gray Payne my sincere thanks? I think what you have done on the food program is amazing. And may I say, Ian, I'm so pleased you haven't yet retired to Wanaka. It's wonderful to know you in that role at this time.
He could be in employment for a long time if this goes on very, very much longer. No, but I think Gray and his team have done a fantastic job. 400 meals a day, 7 days a week, And, you know, people are so enthusiastic to be able to be helping others that they know are in a position of particular need. And City Commissioner Chris Farrelly has asked me to pass on to Council his grateful thanks for the assistance that we're giving. They were in a really desperate situation, and we're filling a gap that is critical. Tau Henare.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. My question is about understanding that iwi chairs have had an input into the Ministry of Health guidelines on tangihanga, and it's good to see that that's changed a wee bit. My concern, though, rests with urban Māori, Mātāwaka, obviously in Tāmaki, upwards of 100,000 Māori living in Tāmaki, and the transportation of their loved ones outside of Tāmaki to their haukainga, to their ancestral lands. Understanding the restrictions on who and how many can go. I even think that's a wee bit of a contentious issue. But as you say, Your Worship, there is a huge angst amongst our community about actually taking the deceased from Tāmaki through to the north or through to the south or east or west or wherever, and that needs some clarification. It needs you and our council to, I suppose, step into the breach and say, hey, we support Māori whānau repatriating their kin to their ancestral homes. It worries me that there is a feeling out there that, oh crikey, we've got to go and cremate them, we've got to go and put them on ice. I mean, I even had one person ring me asking about the use of an ice skating rink as a holding pen for a few months, and so the feeling is out there. I understand the laws and the rules behind it, but I just get the feeling that Māori are being asked to put on hold a quite a significant cultural aspect, and they were looking around and going, how do we do this? You know, we still want to take our people home, which is the first thing they want to do. They realise the marae's even in the north and the south, and some of them are not working, some of them are closed, but they want to get their people home. So my question is, how are we as a council family going to look after Mātāwaka? I know that the iwi chairs, and I know that iwi have their input, but it always seems to me that Mātāwaka, especially in something like this, misses out. Thank you.
Thank you, Tau. Tanya, is there any other comment you'd like to make on that?
Kia ora tau, and I tautoko your whakaaro around Mātāwaka at a time like this. Look, these are very live conversations that we're having. We have a pautikanga sitting under our structure in Auckland Emergency Management, and we're having a lot of kōrero around this topic, and not everyone's seeing eye to eye. We are working very closely with Mace's team as well, but I do think that there is an advocacy piece there that could be done, and I would welcome you to sit down with our pautikanga to have a kōrero about that.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Tanya.
Yeah, thanks. I think it is important to follow that up, and I think everybody around the table understands the pain that this situation is causing. I think probably more than almost anything else, to farewell your loved ones without being there to do it, and then the additional element of taking deceased persons back to their home burial ground. is a real concern. Yet we all know, we all know why the government has got to that point. I have raised it with Carmel Sepuloni, and I'll continue to see if there can be some flexibility in how that's being addressed. And I think if Tanya works through her channels as well, too. But we all understand that situation. It's an awful one. Councillor Shane Henderson.
Nothing, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Richard Hills.
Oh, yes, thank you, Mayor. And I think Angela answered a lot of my asked a lot of my questions based on how we're connecting those agencies, people to agencies, because I think one call, a lot of people are brave enough to ring one number, but if they start having to be moved around and around and around, it can be quite stressful. And I think, yeah, once again, thank you to all the staff who are doing completely different jobs and being spread around and doing quite probably overwhelming work at the moment. My one question is again on staff, just another update of how we're supporting staff. A, if they are maybe older than 70 or immunocompromised or don't feel they can work during this time, are we forcing people into that? Are we still paying them if they can't? The other thing is around mental health and support. I've spoken to lots of our staff who are not feeling great or might have family situations that are extremely affected by this, but they're obviously still working, which is great. But how are we ensuring that we're we're not seeing, managers won't be seeing their staff members every day, they won't be aware necessarily exactly how people are feeling or the way they look? How can we ensure that we're not putting too much pressure on? How are we making sure that we're giving people the breaks or the Friday off or the I don't know, but I just have a concern how we are promoting mental health services and other things for the community, but also our staff at what is a completely intense time for them and their families.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll ask.
Look, thank you, Councillor. In terms of our vulnerable staff, so for example, people over 50, people with immune deficiencies in one form or another, pregnancies, that type of, we actually sent those people home prior to the commencement of Alert 4. So we were aware of those issues, and they've been working from home since that time. They're all receiving, well, if they're unable to work, if they're able to work, well and good. If they're unable to work from home, they're on discretionary leave. So there's no issues around payments, that type of thing. We are aware that the uptake of our employee assistance program around things such as depression and stress and so forth is rising, and we're certainly monitoring that closely. We have our managers are required to be in touch with their teams and to get a sort of a feel as to how things are going. It's not just work-related stress. It may be issues associated with other members of the family losing their jobs, or a more uncertainty or overcrowding, those types of issues. So we are aware that levels of stress are rising amongst our people, but we are certainly putting a lot of effort into mitigating that and ensuring that there are contacts, both formal contacts from their managers, but actually also informal contacts and a bit of fun in a way across the digital networks. So yes, we are aware of the issues, and while we're monitoring them and feel that they are reasonable at the moment, we are aware they're likely to rise over time.
Thank you very much. That's a good explanation. And the last follow-up question, just on the support for, 1,000 people calling yesterday is a bit of a punch in the stomach. I guess you kind of know, but it's pretty amazing. But what do we have enough resource to be supporting that level when that's day one? Are we getting resource from government as well at this time for that centre and the deliveries of that food? And if we can help in any, I know we've got a lot on ourselves, but if there is stuff we can do after hours or whatever that might be, just let us know. Yeah,
that's an important question that I've also put to Mace. We are getting the deliveries through. We are confident, but we don't know what the numbers might level out at, Richard. They might continue to go up, or as people get referred to mainstream social welfare agencies, they may go down. Mace, you might like to add to that.
Thanks, Councillor Hills. Yes, we do have sufficient resource. Tomorrow we will have significant delivery of supplies coming from the Hawke's Bay, as I mentioned. Those are significant. They will be a significant delivery with over 5,000 boxes of emergency food parcels being able to be prepared. As I've said, we envisage that this will be a bridging approach, but that bridge may be quite a long one as more people become in need. So we'll keep an ongoing forecasting of what that need is. And in terms of funding, that funding is coming from the National Emergency Management Group or the Director to fund those supplies, and the collaboration with Countdown, or more correctly, Woolworths New Zealand company, has been very cooperative in being able to deliver those supplies.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tracy Mulholland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a question following my thanks to the executive team. What I would like to ask is that we have a number of small organisations who have assisted with food supplies and food baskets, food distribution in the past, and continue to do so, but their supplies are running low. Now, they are some of the groups that are unknown, and although acknowledged through the likes of local boards, churches and so forth, can I please ask that additional supplies are provided to those groups, such as, and I will outline some groups through the Kelston Hub, Glenavon Hub, Generation Ignite. For example, Generation Ignite had 15 cars they had to turn away. They don't normally have cars coming in. They work through the community centre. They are very low on supplies, and I do note we've said we're helping with the food distribution centre, the food banks, emergency food packages where staff are redeploying and are redeployed to assist with that. We've got the City Mission, we've got the 0800. You said you took 3,000 calls and 1,000 of those were food related. I'm worried about my local area and those small groups who may not know where to go. I don't just want to be referred, please, to a number. I want someone to genuinely, in our team, assist me so I can help these people to get additional food for our local whānau here.
Thank you. I think I'll give that one back to Mace.
Thank you, Your Worship.
There's a degree of cynicism in that thank you, I thought.
No, of course not. I appreciate the problem, Councillor Mulholland. It is those local communities who are the backbone often of providing that welfare. I'll raise it with my head of welfare and see how we can reach out to those community groups, and I'd be very happy to get in contact with you after this to get some specifics for your local area in particular. But in terms of our emergency response, yeah, we'll probably continue doing what we're doing, but in terms of that broader welfare, we can reach into the out to those people as well with others such as Ministry of Social Development.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I really would like to take up that opportunity because these are legitimate local smaller groups who do help our local community. So I will take up that offer, Mr Mayor, and hopefully we can assist and aid those people, and I do support the work, of course, without doubt, that's going on. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Daniel Newman.
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, Kathy's raised the issues that I wanted to raise around the cemeteries. I mean, my understanding, therefore, is that the cemetery and the area where the burial's taking place is closed. But if there are no burials, interments taking place, and the cemetery, although being an operating cemetery, is still a park, and if there's an opportunity for people to still walk and obviously to place flowers. That would be good if we could just have some clarification as to that, so we can get some messaging out to the community, because I think at the moment everybody's just of the view that there is absolutely no way to enter the cemeteries. But if there is an opportunity and a process that we can balance out the need to ensure the health of people whilst ensuring that they can actually enter those local cemeteries, that would be good.
Thank you. Ian, have you got anything you'd like to add to that? I presume the normal rules apply, which is keep within your local neighbourhood, and if you are going out to a park, 2 metres distance. But can we have clarification that it is possible to go to the cemetery if it's within within those rules? Oh, Mace,
so perhaps Your Worship, in my day job I'll respond, but yes, it is possible for people to go into the cemetery. Staying local is that key message, Your Worship, and practicing social distancing. But we do recognise that people still want to visit their loved ones and those in memorialisation and place flowers on important anniversaries. The only real issue is when people drive to those cemeteries, and we don't have them open at the moment due to being able to needing to control entry where we have burials, and not that we've yet had a burial for a COVID-19 case, but we are limiting the number of people who can come into the cemetery, into their bubbles for those burials. But otherwise, people still are able to visit visit cemeteries and place flowers and the like.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just wonder if we could just get some bullet points for clarification that we can just post out to networks. I mean, obviously I don't want half Auckland driving to MMG or something like that, but I mean, there are some local cemeteries that people can access, and whilst I don't want to encourage people to be driving anywhere, if they can walk to and enter those locations, that would be good if we could just explain that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Greg Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a very good, very helpful item for discussion. So thank you to you and the officers. My question is probably in the context of the, I have to say, the very good leadership that Auckland Council is showing, particularly from yourself, Mr. Mayor, and the heads of civil defence and the many other people involved. So my congratulations there. But my question has been, my primary question has been answered, but I did have a secondary one, which was around the wage subsidy. I understand that that is a 12-week subsidy, but I'm not sure what the start date was. I just wondered if the officers were in a position to indicate an end date for that wage subsidy. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Through you, Mr.
Yeah, Ian.
If we can't answer it here, I can get that information out to you.
Thanks, Greg. That's something obviously being done from Wellington. My understanding was that it will go the 12 weeks, but I don't know that they have made a hard and fast rule about whether that will continue beyond that time. I think it's burning about $1 billion a week at the moment, at least. So while the government understands the need for that support, there will come a point where the debt to revenue ratio of government will put a constraint on whatever the program is that they're operating. At the moment, I think it's a critical bridge to keep people going. And if we're able to lift or reduce from level 4 to level 3 at the end of this period, that will really help. But we'll try and get some further clarification on that through Ian Maxwell, and he might send that out in the note to all of us, because I think it'll be relevant to all of us. Thank you very much for that question. Councillor Desley Simpson.
Your Worship, my question, I've got two short questions. First question, the staff member who self-isolated as a result of COVID-19, were they overseas on council business or private travel? First question.
Private travel.
Fantastic, thank you. Second question, on the cemeteries, and look, congratulations what you're doing around that. Of course, I've got a private cemetery in my region and in my ward, and I'm kind of keen to know that we are doing, have we got some liaison with the private providers so that our service levels are equal to, if not better than private providers? I'm just trying to make sure that we are kind of not lagging behind, but certainly at least on, if not ahead of the game. Thank you.
Mace, that one comes to you, I think.
So yes, Councillor Simpson, we are working at a national level with other councils and Funeral Directors Association of New Zealand to ensure that we are benchmarking the services we're providing for cemeteries across the country and also advocating on specific issues back to Ministry of Health and others. But in the Auckland region for private cemeteries, we are also checking in with those cemeteries such as Pariwa, which will be in your ward.
That's it. So I think my point is I want to be not just equal to, but we need to just prove that our own cemeteries are definitely, you're checking in. I just want the answer to be yes, we are.
Yes, we are, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sharon Stewart.
Yes,
Sharon?
Just clarification just on the cemeteries once again. I'm just a little bit concerned that we could be opening up a bit of a Pandora's box by sending out messages that people can go and visit their departed and put flowers on gravesites, because I thought with the whole object of this isolationist and the four-week lockdown, which sounds like it could be a little bit longer, is that we're trying to contain and keep everything local and keep it in the neighbourhood. And yes, if there's a grave site and it's in your neighbourhood and it's in walking distance, that's probably okay. But I just wonder whether we're actually getting advice from even the National Crisis Management Centre, just making sure that we're all doing the same thing, because I think we need to make sure we have the same message, and that message has to be right through the country. And if we start having isolated decisions here and there, that's just one of the questions that I wanted to ask. And just one other, we're talking about the 57 public toilets that have been open for essential drivers. That's really, really good. Just wanting to make sure and find out these public toilets, do they have notices saying that they're only for essential drivers? How often are they being cleaned? That sort of thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Just on the former, look, you're very strong on this, and consistency is really important. The basic rules are to stop, to discourage people, actually to stop people from going out from their homes and places where large numbers of people will gather, or leaving their local neighbourhoods. And I think the rules that will apply around visiting cemeteries are that if you're hopping in your car to drive any distance to it, that's out. And if there are gatherings of people, that's out. You can't allow people to visit deceased relatives that may have died some time ago while stopping people from attending a funeral of somebody who's recently died. So the general rules will apply in visiting cemeteries as to apply to anything else. You can no more hop in the car and drive to a cemetery than you can do the same to go to a beach. And the government has clarified and tightened those rules, and the reason is to stop the transmission of the disease, which is the fundamental underlying driving point of what we're doing. On the toilets, I'll just ask, who am I going to ask? Is it Mace or Ian? There's real competition between the two of them to answer this question.
It's not quite competition, but no, look, so notices are up and they are cleaned, but the usage is not monitored, so they're acting as public toilets as such, but there are notices saying what they're intended to be used for, but we're not actually able to monitor that.
Thank you. IMSB Chair, David Typery.
Kia ora, Your Worship. First and foremost, I just want to acknowledge yourself, and the council as a whole in your resolution to include the board in this committee because it is unique and there are matters outside of the committee of whole, but our inclusion, I think, is very important, and I think truly appreciated by that decision to include us. I do have more than one question, and I work on the basis that my ideal world would be that 9 board members sitting with the councillors, but that's not going to happen. So I might take the leave to ask more than one question on behalf of the board in that vein. And I have a couple of questions re po whakarai and one general question, and that is, in terms of po whakarai, I guess my number one thing from hearing that report is, what is the actual demand from the Māori people in relationship to that unit, and how are we monitoring the effectiveness of that in terms of ensuring that we are reaching the people and being, quite precise that we are getting out to them. And my next question is around the budgeting for all of this, and I note that Māori outcomes will suffer in terms of underspend because projects will be on hold, I would have thought, potentially. And is there going to be a reprioritisation of Te Toa Takatini budget to give effect to the resources that may be required for Māori? And my third question around po whakarai is, how has the board been involved, the Independent Māori Statutory Board been involved, because it wasn't listed at all in that grouping. And my question is, under the legislation that Council has to seek direction and support and around plans and policies and the like for Council, how will the board via its Secretariat be involved? Because I listened earlier when member Henare asked the question and the response was, I'll come and see you. And my concern is, from a board perspective, that the board as a whole should be engaged via the Secretariat rather than individuals being picked off just because they sit on a committee. So those are the three questions I have for po whakarai. The one general question is this, and Councillor Stewart said it just a minute ago, that there's a potential that this lockdown will go longer. And my biggest concern is that part of the reasoning behind that is people aren't staying home. And I understand from my other roles that the police are looking for stronger authority, which may come shortly, in enforcing lockdown. And so my question, general question to all of you is, what is Council's position in enforcing lockdown? And I don't want to sound selfish, but I've been in isolation basically since January the 20th, and I've got quite used to it, as I've said before. But we really need an end sight. And if people are just going out willy-nilly, this is just going to go on forever. And I have a big concern about that. So those are my questions, Your Worship.
Well, I'm going to leave the po whakarai questions to Tanya to answer. On the financial side, excuse me, we are going to have to look at everything, but we've made no decision. So I don't think we can give you an answer on that question yet. Simply that we know that we will be heavily down in terms of our revenue, and the longer this goes on, the greater the revenue drop will be. And we are still in a position where our debt to revenue ratio matters, and we don't have that facility that central government has to lift their borrowing from 19% of GDP to what might be 40%. The second question on how long does this go on, I think, David, we all have that question, and we don't know the answer to it yet, and the answer is likely to be if it has to be extended, because there is still a real risk of a rise in transmission that would overwhelm our health system, it probably will be extended. If we all follow the rules, then the risk of that is limited. And do we have the power to enforce that? No. We do have a line that you can ring, the 105 line or the 105 email to the police, and the police are the enforcers. And I think you'll find that the police will become increasingly less tolerant of people blatantly breaching the rules. you know, for each individual that does that, they are putting the lives of others at risk. So those are the broad answers, but if I can come back to the Pouwhakarai and ask Tanya to comment on that, please.
Kia ora. The first question, Member Taipari, what is the demand? We don't know at this stage, but the sense out in the community is that it's going to be large. That is why we have front-footed by at least trying to coordinate some of the activity going on across agencies. We already know that people hold really great intel. Part of the structure is a PO around intel, and we've got making sure that we're all using the same information so that we have a really good evidence-based view of what's going on, and that information is getting fed in from Māori communities, TPK and others, as well as iwi. In terms of your second question around Māori outcomes budget, agree. That was the kōrero that the Māori Outcomes Steering Group had yesterday. So we're just working through some recommendations which will be going to the chief executives of the group, including the IMSB. In terms of board involvement to date with Pouwhakarai, we have been going for a week trying to set up the structure. We have a po tangata which will not be exclusive, it will be inclusive, and the board is more than welcome, or the members of the Secretariat, to provide advice and intel through that po tangata. And your fourth question around not going directly to specific board members, just to clarify that I was inviting member Henare to come and talk to the po tikanga, which again is not exclusive, it's inclusive, and we've got a variety of staff who have expertise when it comes to tikanga, but not only that, kaumātua and others from the communities who are coming together from time to time to kōrero about matters of tikanga and how we might feed that up through the other agencies.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Well, can I just finish?
Well, look, I'd like you to make it quick, please, David, because you know, time is going on.
Yeah. And simply, I wasn't seeking for council to have the enforcement power. I wanted to understand what council's position was on that, because it will be the police and or civil defence that empowers that. And the second matter is, both myself and Member Henare are here as board members, not members of the public individually, and that's the point I'm trying to make. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Wayne Walker. I can't hear you, Wayne, if you've got your microphone on.
Can you hear me now, Phil?
Yeah, I can hear you now. That's great. So one question and one sub, please.
Sure. All right. I guess broadly, I'm directly involved with a number of things, including the storage and distribution of food to people in need. Also associated with facilities to 3D print masks, for example, for people on the front line, and a number of other things. And what I'm finding is a difficulty locating resources. So, for example, immediately there are a number of pallets of food that I need to source from the airport to bring to Whangaprawa, so it's a matter of locating logistical requirements, and my difficulty is finding the people across council that are able to assist in enabling things. So that's a rather broad question.
So who on council can be in contact with you to assist with that food distribution in that area?
And things generally where.
Yep. Well, let's focus on your specific question, Mace. In terms of groups that may be out in the community that are helping with food distribution, who do they get in touch with in order to ensure that they have the food to distribute? And is there clear criteria around that?
Thank you, Your Worship. So, and Councillor Walker, so in terms of the food that's being delivered for the emergency packages, that's being delivered by New Zealand couriers, so there's no need for assistance. That's being done. But in terms of other food, through the normal social services, so your normal community contacts that you will have in your community.
Okay. Somebody's got
I just have a supplementary question.
Yeah, one supplementary, thank you.
So in civil defence, we used to have contact lists of various resources in the community that were available at a time like this. I just don't know whether any of those contact lists or the like are available anymore.
Mace, any comment in response to that?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We can get those local, as mentioned before, those local civil defence groups, we can get those contacts out to you. No
and just further to that,
sorry, look, I just asked you to restrict it to one, thanks, because I've made that rule for everyone. Councillor John Watson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Could we just a request? Could we, if there's been an update to the 57 toilets, if that's an increase, could we just please have a list of those toilets, perhaps by region? Because in addition to the essential workers, there are these groups of homeless people who rely on these toilets basically to, you know, to exist. So just to get a better handle on what's the closest one to any given settlement. My question, however, just goes to, there's a lot of people out cycling and walking. There's a program on 7 Sharp last night, I think it was Half Moon Bay, of people walking around. What I've found in recent times is a couple of walkways have been shut up in my area that don't seem to pose any, you know, direct threat. They're not, you know, they're in kind of relatively isolated locations. Could we, that sort of activity is really important for people now, and I know there's a balance here, but is there any particular policy that's just been rolled out in the last few days that has seen some of these additional walkways getting shut that, you know, maybe, you know, at a squeeze it might not quite be 2 meters, but generally speaking there's only one person going up and down? Is there any information there by way of update?
Just before I get Mace to answer that, if you've got your microphone still on, can you turn it off if you're not talking, please? Because we're getting a lot of extraneous noise, which I suspect comes from mic still on and being brushed. Mace, do you have an answer to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll ask, I'll get Claudia Voss to go back together with Rod Sheridan, Councillor, just so that I'm not sure of the circumstances of why those walkways would have been closed.
Kia ora koutou, Mace and councillors. This is Claudia Weiss on the line. If you can hear me, I can probably provide a quick update now, if that helps.
That'd be helpful. Thanks, Claudia.
Kia ora, Mayor. Thank you very much for your time today. Some of the smaller walkways have been closed. We've been watching closely the central government guidelines regarding walkways and the ability to maintain social distancing. And the smaller walkways, many of those do not allow that. So if there are other people who pass along those walkways, the single file way that those walkways are structured will not allow safe distancing. And that has been the main reason why those walkways are closed at this stage.
Thank you, and I presume we can get a list of those, the toilets that are open. I've seen a list published somewhere.
Yes, we have a list. Yes, we have a list, and I will follow up with our communications team to see if we can make that more accessible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Young, Paul Young.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Mayor. As get a request from the community recently, my question is, do we accept the PPE equipment donation either from Auckland local or overseas? And how to manage it to protect our essential workers in Auckland Council? Thank you.
I think we'll do that nationally. They're coordinating nationally both the provision of PPE equipment that can be manufactured here and that's being imported. But Ian might be able to throw some light on that. Ian, any comment?
Yes, we've actually had offers of a range of gifts, not just PPE, but other support as well. And it is being managed centrally. And so if there is an opportunity there, I can get in touch with the councillor and put those two organisations in touch so that we can manage it in an appropriate way.
Thank you very much. Any supplementary, Paul?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you. Look, we'll run through comments now, but I'm conscious of the time and we've spent a long time on questions. So please, for those councillors wanting to comment, can you keep your comments relatively concise? We've got another item still to deal with under the extraordinary item. So we'll work backwards again. If you don't need to comment, we'll be very grateful for that. Councillor Young?
No comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Watson?
No comment.
Thank you. Councillor Walker? I don't know whether you've got your mic on, Wayne, again. I'll just keep going and come back to me if you'd like to make a comment. IMSB Chair Taipri?
No further comment, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart?
No comment.
Councillor Sayers?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No comment.
Councillor Newman?
No comment.
Councillor Mulholland?
No comment.
Councillor Hills?
Just thank you, and it's a massive undertaking, and thanks to all the staff.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson? He who hesitates is lost. I'll keep moving. Come back to me if you...
No problem. Thanks.
Thank you. Member Henare?
No comment, Your Worship.
Councillor Fletcher?
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I think it's been a helpful session, but I have every confidence that the officers that are directing this work understand the sweet spot between human rights and human survival. So I'm really encouraging them to make the calls that they need to make.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Filipaina?
I'll save everything for our workshop or weekly update after this, Your Worship.
Councillor Darby?
Yeah, just briefly, look, I understand that this here is an initial report on the response to the health pandemic going forward, and it's probably something for a discussion in our workshop, is that we get stuck into probably looking at the work streams that come out of this, looking at the economic pandemic that's coming out of this COVID situation. There's probably my question really of the Chief Executive is that we need to develop a work stream, keeping in mind that our committee work streams are in large fallen away because they don't have much relevance at the moment. But looking at a work stream that just goes beyond the health response to COVID, because this is a landscape that's dramatically changed, and I think we need to get our heads around that sooner and not later.
Absolutely endorse that comment, Councillor. The tidal wave of the economic impact of this is still coming. Council officers are working quite hard on it with myself and the Chair of the Committee, Desley Simpson. We may have something to report next week or the following week to this emergency committee, but we're working within the much larger context that you rightly point to. We are looking, according to Treasury, at unemployment that could be anywhere between 5 and 10 or 11% plus, and it's more likely to be at the high rather than the low end. So that will be a concern to all of us.
You're breaking up.
Okay, I'm sorry. That will be a concern to all of us, and we will need to get that balance right between cutting our cloth to meet our budget and doing what we can to act as a stimulus to help the economic recovery. But I think if we leave that conversation to next week, Councillor Darby, it's an important point. Councillor Dalton.
No comment, thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to go back to your earlier comments about our water supply, because we're consumed with COVID-19 at the moment, and you said we had a 53% jam fill. It's actually 52%, and so I think it's just to be in our minds that we're not ready to go to water restrictions yet. I've spoken with the Chair of Watercare about the drought may not break till May, June, so we just have to have this in the back of our minds that we may have to deal with something else as well alongside this, and I think that's quite critical. But I'm sure that's something we will have to deal with. But just to be mindful, it isn't over yet, our water shortage.
No, that's absolutely
not
correct.
Very happy news, but yeah, it is an issue. But we have had a big reduction in use, but we need to keep that up. And it's hard with all the messages. We've got all the pandemic messages, but somehow, maybe as elected members, there's the occasional reminder, and it's not about not washing hands, because that's only about 20 megalitres. It's more about stopping washing your house, stopping watering your garden, and stopping washing your car, those sorts of things which are really water intensive.
Yeah, no, that's an important point. Thank you, Councillor. I think our rainfall has been about a third for the first quarter of this year that it normally is. And while we've dropped our consumption by 100 million litres a day from the peak, once we get down below the 47 mark, we may need to step up, and we'll take advice from Watercare on that. We may need to step up whether we move from voluntary compliance with not washing your car in your house to some stricter measures, but we'll have a better take on that, I think, in about a fortnight. Can I come back to Councillor Simpson? I might have missed out.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
My apologies, Councillor. It wasn't deliberate.
Oh, no, I know that. Look, just a quick comment. Mace, could you contact me offline? I've got a couple of PPE providers who've got stock locally. So that was my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and my apologies. Councillor Coombe. Not getting any reply from...
Yes, thank you. I am here.
Yep, thank you. Any comment?
Yeah, I would like to make a comment in terms of supporting that we are making public all of the activities that Council is putting in place to support the community through the crisis. And I have made it very public about just being how impressed I am and proud just in terms of that response and how the Council team have worked around the clock to put in place the response. And it's not just the continuation of the essential services, but this short report highlights how it's responding, stepping up to support vulnerable communities and respond to different community needs. So I think that's really do support that being put out there. Just from the comments from councillors, do appreciate there's lots of things still to work through and local issues and things that I do appreciate the quick response I'm getting to things that I'm raising. So I did just want to acknowledge that, and in terms of supporting that we are making it public what the activities are underway. And I think it also helps that we do now have our Auckland website has been transformed in a way that means all of the information is there. And I think we're getting better at putting stuff up very quickly and having clear communication so that we don't cause concern, additional concern by just not being clear about what support is there and what we are asking of the community at the same time. So thank you. I just wanted to make those few comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Much appreciated. Councillor Collins.
No comment from me, thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Again, congratulations to the staff. It's good work, but the challenge is still before us and will only get greater as we go through the next 4 to 8, 12 weeks and beyond. Speaking to the business community leaders yesterday, they are fielding thousands of calls from businesses who are facing decimation. And we are looking at a tidal wave of issues coming towards us, so we need to be prepared. And our budgets are only limited. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Once we've dealt with the health crisis, that's not the end of it. That's a good point. It will have severe economic implications, and that will be quite new to our generation, maybe not to our parents and grandparents. Councillor Casey.
No comment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bartley.
The staff for everything they're doing, in particular Ian, Stephen, Kate and Natalie, in regards to housing our homeless and rough sleepers during the lockdown. Really appreciate their fast response and their efforts there. And also in terms of food, doing the food parcels. But just want to reiterate that the food parcels, we need to be very open with the criteria there and the eligibility, because the ones that regularly access welfare services, they've got some, they're being catered to through Kainga Ora, in my area through Tamaki Regeneration Company, but those that are working who are not in, state houses, they are not being catered to in that regard. So if they're on subsidies, I think they are coming across some barriers in accessing food parcels through ringing our helpline. So I want to make sure that we're very open with that criteria. And also that the issues that I see coming through now are in regards to mental health and well-being for people. People are very anxious and worried, and what role can we play there as council? And also in terms of economic recovery. So I have a lot of local businesses closing down and wanting to see AT step up in terms of local economic development recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Look, we're noting the activities that have been undertaken by the Council to support the wider community in response to COVID-19.